So let's quickly get started and start running the application once for the first time, and we'll try to populate some data. The ID is auto-populated, so we'll try giving names to the elements we have. Okay, I have a set of 5 or 8 products that are lined up that can be inserted. We'll try inserting 2 or 3 of those and then play with the data, and then we'll go and see the code along with the MySqL setup, the table setup and the insertion of data, etc. Okay, so now let's insert the laptop first. Okay, so let's try inserting the laptop first. So this laptop, so I'm gonna name it as laptop, give it a price, say $1,000, and additional data, like I'm just going to give the purchase date. I'm just going to mostly make it quite recently. So we've got a data that is inserted. It's going to be laptop, and I've not done any primary key constraint with respect to the name, so you can keep adding duplicates. We can work around with that. ID and name can be combined and made as a, what do you say, unique key constraint. Then maybe like name can be used as a unique key constraint, but now just for learning sake, I'm just maintaining the ID as a unique constraint or the primary key. Okay, so now let's try adding one more element. Let me add Surface Studio. I think it should be there already. Choose image. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna add Surface Studio. Surface Studio is here. Surface Studio, and the price is going to be more than $2,000. I'll give the same date, or maybe like modify it a little earlier, 2020. Insert it. Yeah, another record is inserted. I'll try clicking on the first one, the second one. Yeah, so the data is getting played around. We are able to view the data, we are able to move around with the data, we are able to insert the data. So let's try, just bear with me, I want to insert just one more record. So let's try and insert a headphone, which is needed, quite needed. So let me try choosing the image. I'm not sure why the file path gets reset every time in Netbeans, which is quite annoying. So I usually use IntelliJ and Eclipse, but now for learning, we'll just get started off with this. We'll try to have some future tutorials using that. So now it's going to be headphones. Just give the name as headphones, and the price should be a little less. So $500 should be fine. And we'll give the date as, so let me give that a little. We'll just play around with this. Okay. So not December, no date validation has been done, but let me just put it here and try to insert it. Okay, so 3 records. Okay, a headphone, a laptop, and a Surface Studio, just to get things started. Okay, so this is our application. So hope you like it. So this one next works, the first one works, the next, previous, last. So all of these would work. Okay, so now for a start, let me show you on how I got the MySqL setup done. Okay, so I'm just using a very simple table here called products, and the schema for the product is like using ID, name, price, and the date. Okay, so date and the image. The image is like kind of a blob data, a long blob to be precise. You can view the data type here using table inspector. So you can see how much it's occupying, the columns, the types of the columns, long blob, etc., the indexes. I've just added the primary key, so that's only going to be displayed here. No triggers, no foreign keys, since only one table is here. And the primary key. So maybe we can try adding the name to the primary key a little later, but since I've not done any validation in the Java code, we'll just keep it to this, stick to this as of now. So this is the table structure. Okay, so for you to get started with MySqL and create a new schema, you can just go ahead and right click on a new schema. So the initial part would be like, just go here, go to home. You should have a MySqL connection. If not, just click on the plus arrow, give a connection name, Your host name is usually the local host IP, the port. The username is, I've only created a single user called root, and the password as usual is password or admin. Then you can use this connection. I've saved that. Once you do that, you get a new connection and you see all the schemas that are available. Okay, so now you can go ahead and create a schema. Okay, create a schema is like new schema, new 1 2 3. So that's it. You just went ahead and created a new schema. Okay, perfect. It's going to execute this schema now. If you see, new 1 2 3 has been created. Okay, and if you want to go ahead and create a table, very simple. Create a table, just give the table name here, a column name here. Just the column name part is like, you need to just define a column, table name, a column 1 2 3. After you create this, another table 1 2 3 and another column. Very simple. And you can change the data types. Okay, I guess you should be familiar with MySQL, but the MySQL workbench allows you to create tables and get started quite easily. Okay, so this is about getting a new schema, a new table created. We already have the new schema, which is products db2, and I'm going to just see whatever data that we inserted right from the application. Has it been inserted? So that's what I'm going to check. Yeah, so we've got all of the data, and see, this is quite an interesting part, seeing the blob image here. So the 3 records are here, and we are just going to see the code now. So the SQL part is done. Finally, after I explain you the Java part, I'll try and uploading this source code to Git along with the SQL queries, and I will share you the link for that as well, and you can make use of it. So that comes along with this video. So please post your comments if you have any reviews about the speed in which I'm going. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, like, I'm going to share you the code anyway. Okay, so I don't want to go write the application from scratch. I'm going to give you a walkthrough on what has been done, and I'll help you debug some issues that I already have here. Okay, so there are some issues with respect to the delete functionality, which I specifically left it so that I can cover it as part of the video, and I'll teach you on how to debug. Okay, so a debug functionality is here in Netbeans, which is similar to what we have in IntelliJ as well as in Eclipse. Okay, so this is the main class. As in Java, this is the main class having the main method, where we have the main window class written. You can have another class name if you wish. I've just kept it simple and named it as main window, and used a constructor here to initialize the components and show products, etc. Show products is a function that I've written just to iterate through the records here. Okay, so if you see, if you run the project now, what's going to happen is, like, it's going to get the data from the backend and show you everything. Okay, so this part, show products in JTable, like, just to show and iterate through this, we need this method here. I'll show you the exact functionality of this. Okay, so then I'll walk you through how to get a connection from MySQL, and how to use this object. We'll also try to handle this more appropriately whenever we are using it. So this check inputs is nothing but I'm just handling just doing some basic validation so that we don't enter empty data in text name, text price, and text add date, etc. I'm also handling the image part, resizing it according to the resolution that we have. And the product list is like, this is a method which I'm going to use to show the data. Okay, so this one, so all of these functions or methods that are written and have the underscore and button choose or whatever that resembles a name, a name of a button or something, is the functionality when you click on a button. Okay, so whatever needs to be achieved when you click this button. Okay, so that's going to be achieved using this method. Okay, I'll show you how the design is done. The design is pretty simple. Okay, so what you need to do is, like, if you see the design part, okay, so you need to iterate through all of the records that are present. So for that you'll need something called as a JTable. Okay, so that's available in the palette. Okay, so to store a set of data and to display them, you'll need something called as the JTable. And all of these things are straightforward. It's just a label element that you usually have for all of these, and it's a simple text box, a date picker, and an image handler. Okay, and what is done here, it's a button. So this button will have some functionality. So you'll be wondering how the functionality is achieved. Like, so how does this click work? How does the click open a file explorer? How does the insert go ahead and open a DB connection and insert the data, etc.? So how it is achieved is like using the action performed event handler. So I've not added any of the event handlers that are not needed as of now. I'm just doing a basic functionality using action performed. So what it does is, like, when you click on the insert button, it opens up a piece of code. Okay, so what it does is, like, it goes ahead in your main window class, opens this method which is like driven by this event, the action event parameter. So whatever data or whatever event params or parameters you pass in, or whatever events are generated as part of it, will be available as part of this parameter. So I think I've not made use of any of the event handling parameters here, but you can make use of things like you can see the functionality like event dot. Okay, so you can get the action command, you can get when, so when the event or when the button was pressed, the parameter string, etc. So you can achieve some functionality, you can get the name of the button, etc. Okay, just a simple event handler, not much, but all of the rest of the functionality needs to be taken care by you. You'll just need so I'll go into these steps a little later. Let's finish up with the design part. Okay, so I've explained how a button is going to handle. Labels are created, images or text boxes are created, a JTable, how it works. So a JTable needs one special thing. Okay, it needs a model. So it needs to know what kind of data it is going to show. Okay, so for that you'll need something called as a model. So you can define it on your own, or you can create something using this. Okay, so you can insert if you insert something, new records will pop up here, and you can even specify default values when it's going to load up. All of these things can be done. So once you do this, it'll get automatically popped up. So I'm only adding a column here. Okay, I'm not adding any rows. Okay, so I don't want to mess up the functionality. I'm clicking on cancel. So you just need to know about the table model with respect to the JTable. All of the others are going to be taken care by the event handlers. The event handlers, namely action performed. Okay, and these things are just going to the text box is just needed to read the data. Okay, so here what happens is, like, the name action performed. Let me see if I've done any code. So the name, oh, I've accidentally added, now no functionality is achieved. Okay, let it be there. We don't need to touch it. Can do an undo. So that's the problem with Netbeans, like you cannot undo some things. So you should be careful when you do a double click of an event. Okay, so since we're not doing anything, we'll just leave that as such. So see here, there's no event here. See here, there's no event. No event is handled based on the text boxes and the images. Only the buttons are going to be having event handlers. Even the JTable, I've just handled a small part using iteration, so that I'll cover a little later. Okay, so now I guess you would have had a pretty decent idea on how these things work. Okay, so event handling using buttons and choosing an image and iterating through these records. Okay, so let's do one thing now. Let's go to the next step and see how the MySql connection, how the data is getting populated, how the buttons are interacting. Okay, so here these three things, these 4 buttons have a small Java code that's written. So what's written is like how the position, like if I'm in the position, a running number, okay, a running number that's going to run through a list of items and show you whether we need to go to the next step, or we go if it's in the last step we don't need to go to the next. Okay, so those kind of logics are handled using this kind of code, a simple algorithm where if you do not have any element next, you don't need to go ahead, you don't need to populate the position value. If you are in the first item, you don't need to decrement the value, as simple as that. Okay, so first action performed is going to take your pointer to the first record. So if you click on this first record, it's going to take your action to the first record. Okay, as simple as that. Excuse me for that. Then now we'll go ahead and see how the events are getting handled. Okay, so the event handling part. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you how the connection is going to take place. Okay, so now the main part is going to come in where you're going to just get a basic connection from your MySql database. Okay, it's a very simple JDBC connection. I'm going to use the basic driver manager part. I'm not doing any JPA kind of stuff. I'm just using the JavaSQL driver manager class and getting a connection using the query string. So in this query string, what you need to pass is like the JDBC MySql query string with the name of the schema that you're going to connect, the port of your MySql connection that's running, the local host, or the IP address 127.0.0.1, and your admin and password, username and password. It shouldn't be done like this. There are various authentication methodologies available, but for us to get started with basic functionality of Java, I'm skipping all of those for now. We can learn that a little later. So now once you get a connection, I'm just returning this connection object. What it does is like it's going to like return a connection object with a pointer to the MySql database. It's going to just give you a connection on which you can work around and insert data, delete data, view data, etc. Okay, so now once you get the connection, okay, so let's go to the main part now. So the insert. So in each of the insert, update, or delete, the first thing that you would do is like validate the inputs and check for the image path and do a validation of the get connection part. So once you get a connection, a simple prepared statement is used to insert data here, and in the case of update, an update statement is used. We are just using prepared statement. Date format is needed for the date. All of these things are the same. You can actually do some refactoring on your own interest. All of these can be converted to separate methods and can be referred from each of these insert, update, or delete commands. Okay, for this insert action alone, we need to read an image. Okay, so for reading an image, what we need to use is something called as a file input stream. Okay, there's another functionality where you can easily set a blob here, but that wasn't working. So that's the reason I've used a file input stream. Okay, just read the file from the image path here. So the image path is passed from the this part here. The image path comes from the choose image button. So this path will be passed down to this image path functionality. Okay, so that what happens, let me show you that. So here, when you choose the button image action performed, this image path is going to get assigned with the path name. Okay, so this is where you might get confused with how the image path is getting populated, blah blah blah. So you don't need to get worried. All of these are functionalities using Java's basic file name extension filter and JFile chooser. Just JFile chooser gives you that browse button. All of those. Okay, so getting the image path from the image action performed functionality, after it's done, then you're checking. So if you're not doing the button image, if you're not choosing the image, and if you're going to select on insert, it's going to throw up an error saying that image path is null, or like one or more fields are empty. I've just added a simple message dialog box. Okay, you need to take care of that. Okay, so once this is done, I guess you've got a pretty much basic idea on what I'm trying to explain here. I'm just setting the values here, reading a file using file input stream, assigning the image using the binary output stream and converting to a byte array and setting the bytes to the prepared statement object. Okay, so now the show products in JTable. So what it does is, like, after you execute the update, you need to immediately update this UI, right? For that, I'm doing nothing but using this show products. Okay, so I'm just trying to get the model and just setting the row count, updating the row count, and if there's say, like, if I'm adding a new record, I need to add a new row here. So I guess you achieve or understand the functionality. So since JTable doesn't have the dynamic functionality of using that insert or adding a new row automatically, this particular functionality would be very helpful. This is something that's been written automatically. So once done, the data insert that we saw, the message table sorry, the message dialog box would be displayed. Okay, and so you can remove all of the system.out.println. Those are not good ways to code. You can remove all of those once you try running your code from your PC, and that's about it. So now you inserted, we've seen the insert functionality. So similar to that, the update functionality is handled. Okay, so in the update functionality, you can take it as a homework to, like, rename these button names or the event handlers, just to say something like button insert action performed, button update action performed, or something like that. So okay, so I showed you how to do that. You can do that. Yeah, nothing but we are just handling using the update command, and if you're going to update your image stream as well, you can very well do that. Just a simple so if you face an issue, using the set block, okay, functionality here, we can use the same functionality that I've achieved using the binary array output stream here. This might cause an issue if you try to update. Okay, we can try to fix that as well. So we can take that as a pointer. We'll need to check if this functionality of update works. Okay, and update image needs to be checked. Okay. So now the update functionality is also seen, image action performed is seen, insert is also seen. I've explained you how the first action performed, next action performed, and previous action performed are done. And then we can go to the delete functionality. So the delete functionality is just going to show which ID or which element you clicked is going to be passed. Okay, so for this, what is needed is like the text ID. Okay, so this you might get confused. So the text ID gets its value using the text ID field. So if you want to see what is the ID, this is the text ID field. Okay, so I mapped it into the model in such a way that once this value is selected, the ID gets populated into the text ID. Okay, you don't need to get confused with that, because if you do not select anything, you will not be able to delete anything. So that's been handled as well. So it will just say product not deleted, no ID to delete. Okay, so now once you do this, the same opening connection using the prepared statement, deleting, and show the, in this functionality what is needed is, like, since you're deleting some data, the number of rows needs to be reduced. So that functionality is taken care by this method. Okay, after the product is deleted, we should be getting the product deleted, and then we should be good to go. I guess I've covered all of the functionality here: insert, delete, update, and the show table. You must be wondering what all of these codes are. So all of these codes get generated when you add elements to the design. Okay, so this you should be knowing, just a heads up. So I'm just going to set, so all of the labels that you create, everything will be created via a new object. You will not be able to work on this. I'm trying to type out here and I'll not be able to do it. Okay. So any change, so this is the place where whatever action you do, the design where you're assigning a action listener, all of those will be shown here. Okay. So the homework for you would be like, so let me try updating. Okay, so let's try updating the J button 3. Okay, so J button 3 is nothing but the update functionality. Let's go to the properties of the update functionality. So we'll see J button 3 action performed. So the name is update, but it's not updated somewhere else. Where exactly is that? It's in the events. Sorry, the code part. The variable name, just an update here, and all of the code would be regenerated. Okay, you see this? Update action performed. You can double click this. Update action performed. Okay, so it's magic, but you will not be able to change it by yourself. So if I try to type out here, it will cause some ambiguous issues. So you'll not be able to change it from here. You'll just need to change it using the properties option. Okay, as simple as that. And what else? So we'll try to fix issues one by one here. Okay, we'll go to the delete. We'll see the delete name. We'll go to the code. We'll change the name of the delete. That's it. So now if you go and double click, delete action performed. Okay, so let these things remain. So maybe like to follow a standard, we'll use something called button underscore delete. Okay, just to follow a uniform pattern. And for update as well. Oops, sorry. Update, oops. Be careful, always save your project. So I'm going to change this to btn underscore update. So all of the data would be updated. So insert. So this, let's check the button choose image. Button choose image. Okay. Button first, button next, button previous, and button last. So all of these code review elements are handled properly. So what's happening here? So we've renamed everything properly. Okay, so now let's try and debug some code. Okay, so now I'll show you how to debug. We've seen how to run the project. Now let's see how to debug the code. Now let's go ahead and start debugging. Okay, so to debug, let's close the existing running functionality and we'll try running this now. So using debug, you just need to use this button here. Okay, or there's another way, just use right click and debug file. Okay, so for using debug, you need to add debug points. Okay, so let's try to test the insert functionality. Okay, so we'll try to run step by step on how the data is getting inserted. Okay, so we'll search for the insert query. The best way is to go and do this. Okay, so here I'm going to double click. So if you double click here, a debug point would be added. Okay, so we can check whether connection is getting proper. So if you face any issues, you can easily go ahead and debug like this. Okay, and finally after the update, if the data insert is taking place, we'll just check it out. So let's go ahead and do a first debug. Here I go. So what I'm going to do is like, let's add one more image from our repertoire. So here I'm going to go ahead. Okay, let's try achieving the delete functionality. See, it's working fine. So now there's another issue with delete, so let me go into that later. So we'll debug a successful scenario here. So let me add a keyboard to our inventory. So keyboard. Let me quickly check if my recording is on. I just paused it for a second, so just verifying it. Okay, so now you see the debugging is running. Okay, so once I do keyboard should be like around $50 or $20 or $30, and we'll add some additional data, just the purchase date, 21 June 6th, and we'll try to insert. So now if you note, when I do an insert, this particular debug point will be triggered. Let's see. Here you go. So if you see this, the entire debug or the stack trace, so how the insert buttons main events are getting called, right to the event dispatch thread. Okay, right to the event dispatch thread, it's going to be showing us. So line number 479, our debug point is at line number 479. So the next debug point is at line number 482. Okay, so just before we step into the debug functionality, what I'm going to do is like, I'm going to add another debug point on the check inputs part. Okay, so when we step into the function, what's going to happen is like, it's going to call the check inputs function. So before we go there, we'll just check the value that's present in the image part. Okay, so that can be checked using this variables method or the watches. You can add the image path here, okay, and check. So the directory path, the path to the JPEG file is perfectly done here, so there's no issue with the image path. Okay, and all of the variables that come about with the event I showed you, right? The action command, so which is like insert, and this means whatever is the variables that are part of your current object. This refers to the current object, which is your main window. So all of the elements like that are loaded when your application is executing will be having all of their variables defined here. Okay, be it static variables, so we'll not be going into those things now, so those will throw up some junk. Okay, so the text, so what is the value that each of the buttons hold, everything can be seen here. How the data is propagated from code to your JVM's executed piece of code. So this is your executable code. So how it is propagated from code to the runnable machine can be observed using debug. Okay, so these are the debug points, around 6 debug points, and the watches. Okay, so the image path is populating perfectly. Now let's click on the next step. So how do we go to the next step? There are various steps here. Okay, so the F8, which I usually do, is like goes to the next step. You can press the F8 from your keyboard or use the F8 here. If you want to do step into, there's something called the step into, which goes into the interim Java functionality. So if it's a string or if it's a hash map, it will even go into the interim Java functionality of that. Okay, but we don't need that. We'll just do a step over. We'll do one by one. Okay, so now when we go into the check inputs functionality, what happens is like, we'll need to check whether the float value, okay, the float value that we have passed, that is the price value. Okay, so whatever the price that we've given for our products is getting parsed correctly. Say why we do this is because if we do not parse the float value, if you pass a string, you might get an exception here. You can even handle this exception in a more reduced way or a less visible way. So I've just handled it using exception. So a better way would be to handle exceptions like I think it's the format exception or format parse exception, I guess. Okay, so parse exception. So what do we call the exception that needs to be handled for the... So if you see, so once you do a control click, it shows you the number. Oh my god, my basics have gone bad. So if you see, that's gone a number format exception. As simple as that. Okay, so just replace the exception with number format exception. This is how you should be handling an exception, because if you do not handle it specific to the number format exception, say if you get a null pointer here, okay, for a bizarre reason, even though you've handled the nulls here, if you get a null pointer here, the exception that you're handling is an exception. You'll not be sure whether it's a number format or a null pointer. So if it's a null pointer, the exception will not be handled by this. The exception will be propagated back. So since we've handled nulls, I'm not adding a null pointer or another exception clause. I'm just handling it in a simple number format exception way. Okay, so now we've handled the check inputs part. We are checking the values for the text price. Let's go step into. Okay, I'll use the keyboard. That's more, or for our sake, let me do it using this. So I think it's able to parse it. There's no number format exception achieved. Going is good. So we've inputted a correct we've inputted a correct price, and so the check inputs and the image path have been validated perfectly. So now you can go and check the get connection. So the get connection method also need to be checked here. So each time what I'm doing is like I'm setting the connection value to null. Okay, so each time I'm going to get a connection object, I'm resetting the value. So before doing that, a best practice approach would be to close your connection after every time you use it. Okay, so here what I've done is like I've not handled it properly, so I'll just be doing that as part of this now. So once the connection is achieved from the MySql database, so I've explained this part where you're going to just get the connection from the DB. You've got the connection. For you to create or interact with the tables from the database, you need a prepared statement. A prepared statement, what it does is like it compiles the SQL queries. So the SQL queries have to be in the correct format, inserted into products, the column values, and the specific parameterized values. The parameterized values will be given in this format: 1, 2, 3, and 4. The order has to be maintained properly. So here there was an issue when I was using file input stream. Okay, when I was using file input stream, what happened was like it was throwing an error where this prepared statement was not able to set it into the blob value. Okay, so as a workaround, what I did was like I handled using the byte array output stream, read the file using file input stream, passed it to the binary output stream, created a set of buffer. So I'm just going to read it by buffer using 1024, which is like a single kilobyte. I'm just going to loop around it and I'm going to write it to the array. Okay, so finally after you get the byte array, you can just set it as part of the prepared statement. So that's the reason I've gone ahead and not use the set blob, which is the usual approach. Okay, rather than using a directly available method, I'm using a workaround here. So now let's debug quickly. I guess I'm going in depth too much. I usually use F8, so that's the reason I'm struggling with the UI part. So the date part, again, you see it's going to do again a format. So for that you'll need to handle it using a format. Actually, it should have thrown a format exception here. Another catch clause has to be added. Oh, it's not adding, it's not throwing a format exception. That's bizarre. Okay, so now you're getting the date. So this date, you're just passing it to the third value, which is this question mark here. The add date column value is going to get this. And now I told you about the image handling. Okay, so we'll just go over one by one. 1, 2, so now we are reading the file one by one. So let's see how many image, how many buffer. So it's just reading one by one. Not sure what it's doing here. It's just writing out buffer by buffer. So the length, so the total length is 330. It's going to read around 3 to 4 times, I guess. So it's reading so many bytes. So maybe we could have used a better byte array, like 2048. So maybe like I'll add a step. Okay, so if you want to step over a loop, okay, so that's one thing I can tell you. So if you want to step over that expression, you can just click on this. So then it will come to this part. Okay. So then what happens is like it's going to come to this part over here. Step out, step into the So now what happens is like it's taken so much time. So it's taken so much. Okay. So now let's continue with the insertion process. Okay. So now it's inserted. We've stepped over the functionality, and since it was going into a loop one by one, I used the step over functionality. Now you can use the step into. So now you see the message box. It goes one by one. And here you go. So if you want to see the console, you can just see the output in your console one by one rather than seeing this image here. So I would rather show the output here. Okay, so it's just going to show. You'll just pin it up. Okay. So that it will be easy for us when we are going to debug. Okay, just bear with me with that. So now we've got the name. So now it's even going into that part. So I think we can come out of it. I'm going to try to step over it. So now I'm going to do a continue. So now everything is read and the data is inserted. Okay. So the insertion is achieved using debug. Okay. So now I was telling you there is a issue with respect to update, and there is an issue with respect to delete. Okay, so now let's try to delete an existing. So let's try to delete the headphone. Okay, let's click on delete. It's saying that product not deleted. So if you see, there's a huge stack trace here. Oh my god. So this stack trace, it says like no value specified for parameter 1. So what it's going to do, I'm going to go ahead and check the SQL error. I'll not be able to check the SQL error, but I'll be able to check my code. So the exact error has happened at line number 559. Maybe I'll reduce the font size here so that we'll be able to. Okay, it's happened at 559. Okay, 559. What is happening? So it's executing an update. So what is happening? So we've given text id dot get text. Insertion is id. So do you see what is the error here? We have not set the parameter here. So what we have not set is like if you see in the insert functionality, we are setting something called ps.setString, and that part we are not doing it here. So let's try to fix the issue. So even though ID is populated, we need to add that. So what we'll do is like we'll do the ps.setString. So that's how you debug. So when you do a debug, you'll be able to get that. Luckily, we've got a very meaningful message here. So that's the reason I was able to achieve or fix it pretty quickly. So now what we need to do is like we need to close it since we need to recompile, and we'll need to run the code again. So let me do a debug again. Oh, what does it say? It says it's having an error. The error is like I'm setting a string here, but it's an integer. Okay. So it's always better to use here. Okay. My basics have gone very bad. It's set int. Sorry. Okay. So you can even use a small primitive integer or a object integer. The only advantage of using an object is like it comes around packed with some extra functionality where you can use. So id dot. So you can compare. You have set of methods that you can use, but when you use a primitive data type, you'll not be able to use that. So now the issue is fixed. Now try running the code. I'll try to debug again. Now let's quickly go over and try to delete the record. So let's try and delete the headphone. Okay. Delete, product deleted. Amazing. So and you see the JTable has refreshed itself. So the delete functionality is fixed. So I told you there's another issue that we need to take care of, the update functionality. Say I want to update the Surface Studio. Okay, the Surface Studio's image. Okay, I'm going to update to another junk image, say like the VR. So let me try putting the VR image to the Surface image. Okay, so I'm going to try updating the Surface Studio with this image. So if I do this update, so what's going to happen, it's going into the update part, it's validating properly, it's getting the connection, it's got the image part, but it's using the old functionality of file input stream. Let's see if it's going to work fine. It's working fine. I guess I fixed it. I'm not sure. It wasn't working fine with the file input stream, but it's able to read the file now. That's pretty interesting. So I've given you two variants. Okay, I've given you two variants. One using the set blob. Okay, so you can either use the set blob functionality, which doesn't require you to use any file input stream or binary array input stream or a blob data, or you do not need to split it or loop it into a set of bytes and then pass it into the prepared statement. It's a simple blob image. You just read it from the file, pass the input stream straight directly. If you run into any issues with your PC, so I ran into an issue because like I used a different SQL connector. If you see my directory, so the libraries that I included, okay, if you see the libraries, there's something called MySql connector. I remember I updated this recently, maybe that would have fixed the issue. But when I was using some time back, I was using an older connector. Maybe that could be the issue. So if you need to be very stringent about the connector you're going to use, okay? So be wary of that. And that's about it. So we've fixed a delete issue, an update issue, and one other input I would like to show is like how to handle the connection. Okay, so it is always safe to close the connection after you open it. Okay, so what I'm going to show here is like I'm opening a connection here, I'm getting a connection here, but within the try block, I'm just not closing it. So what usually can be done is like you can use a finally block here. Okay, so there's a try block here, there's a catch block here, and here they've handled exception wrongly. Here it's handled properly, SQL exception. Here it is SQL exception. Okay, so file input exception also needs to be handled. So what you need to do is like go into this, see what is the exception that needs to be handled. So this is the exact way you should be handling. Okay, so you need to find out which exception needs to be specifically thrown, because if you say exception generically, what happens is like you'll not know what exception actually happened. And also I've not printed out the stack trace here, which is also not going to give you any idea. So let me quickly see what is the error here. Okay, let me see whether I need to. So you need to import the file not found exception. So SQL exception just next to the SQL exception. IO, file comes under IO, file not found. So now hopefully that issue should go off. So I'm just trying to explain on how to debug even if you have the source code. Okay, even if you have the source code, what happens is like you might not be able to run if you run into some issues. Some people might be plays with multicatch. Okay, so this is a new functionality that's in Java 8. So rather than writing two separate functionalities, I'm using the multicatch functionality. Okay, so but this loses the objective of finding out which error actually happened. So for that to be fixed, what I'll do is like I'll try to print out the stack trace. Whenever you work with Java, print out the stack trace. That's the only reason by which we were able to fix the delete issue quickly. Okay, so ex dot I think since the message is handled here, it's not allowing me to do it, but it should be allowing me to do it. Give me a second. Why? Any use without arguments. Okay, so let's see how we achieved it in the update part. So the update threw an error. So the update threw an error in a way, the delete threw an error. So how did the delete? See here, we are going to go into delete. Yeah, see, so how it's handled is like, since we are going to handle this like this, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to use logger.logger and I'm going to throw up the error. Okay, so just use the same way that they've done. So we were achieving it. Okay, so here, so what I'm going to do Do the same thing here. That's it. So what is needed here, because like since the multicatch is not allowing you to print out stack trace directly as it is a throwable class, we are using the logger functionality. So we are using the logger and printing out the stack trace. So that's how it's achieved. You can change the level of the logger from severe, debug, info, whatever. Okay. So now we are handling this error here. Okay, so now the main part is not yet covered. So I want you to like close this connection. So if connection is not equal to null, okay, so what I'm going to do is like I'm going to close it. Okay. So since both of these are not opening the connection separately, so what I'm going to do is like I'm going to add a separate condition here. Okay, and it'll anyways throw up another issue. Now it should throw up an issue. Yeah, it'll ask us to handle the error, so we'll need to add another try catch. Okay, so this has to be taken care. Okay, usually this is added in the finally. So what we can do is maybe surround everything with a common try catch. Okay, or we'll leave it like that. That should be good enough. So we are handling it. So if the connection is not null, we are going to close it. So the same functionality needs to be handled everywhere. So wherever you're using the connection object, say in the insert function you're using the connection object, but you're not closing it. But since here you're using a single try catch, I'm going to use it in the finally block. So the reason why it is throwing is like connection is not defined. It is outside the scope here. So what we need to do is like we need to declare connection here, make it as null. Okay, and all of the errors should go away. Okay. Okay, cool. So now we've handled the finally. So what I'm thinking is like since finally executes every time a try block is executed, we'll also do this the same way here. So what we'll do is like we'll try to do a refactor here. So we'll try to write a method. So refactor extract a method. So how do you extract a method? So what I'm going to do, refactor so it's not able to do it properly. In IntelliJ or in Eclipse, a simple refactor method would be achieved. What ideally would happen is like so let's stop the debugging now. Let's make this method private, close connection. So connection is there. So what does it do? So we've handled it here, but anyways, what does it say? Invalid method declaration. Why is it invalid? Okay. Just asking me to return a connection object. Okay. Return connection. Okay, so cool. So let's quickly format everything. So rather than typing it out each time, since it is not used never used, what it's saying is like it's throwing up an error. Okay. So what we'll do is like every time, what we'll do is like whenever there is a finally method, we'll try to use that method. We'll replace the existing functionality. So here we added so we didn't add it here. So let's come back to update. So we'll finish off what we've done so far. Insert. So in insert, we added the finally block. Okay, so rather than doing it like this, just add close connection object. Simple, right? So everywhere we can just add a finally block. So this is how you do refactoring. Okay, and you can remove the system.out.println after you achieve the learning functionality. And so in the finally block, I'm just going to use the same method. So repetitive code is avoided here. So that's what I'm trying to achieve, nothing else. Okay, so this finally block can be used in the place where so let's see, we added it to the end of a place. So where did we do that? Yeah, here we did like that, I guess. Yeah, so I think we removed it. So for each of the try catch, add a finally. Okay, okay, and here this finally, and format, just a very basic level of coding here, not going into details. So we have added finally to the update action, we have added finally to the insert action. We have not added anything here, so we don't need to take care of that. Delete action is handled properly, so all the connections are closed. Okay, as an added functionality, you can even try closing the prepared statement as a homework. So that's about it, guys. You can ping me or comment if you have any doubts. So the last step now I'm going to jump or go into is going to be like uploading this to my Git repository. Okay, so I don't use the normal Git tools. I just use something called as GitExtensions. So let me try and create a Git repo in the folder I have. Okay, so I'm going to create in the product. So let me go ahead here. So this is the IMS project. So let me try creating a repo here. So I'll just do a simple git create new repository, personal repository, yeah, create. Okay, and what we can do is like you can open up the repository. So directory doesn't exist because I changed the directory name. You go to IMS, go back to Java. You always need to go to the .git part. Okay, so chucks. So click on Java. Okay, and click on open. So now you have a empty repo here. So what we can do is like we can add all of our classes here. I initialize the repo, very basic stuff, just adding all of the repos. You don't need to learn any of the commands, but before that I'll just show you one thing. You can see something called as a console. Okay, so if you see, one second during commit I'll show. Okay, so there are 75 files that we are going to commit here, so including the build, the classes, everything, the jar that is generated. So stage and okay, no, you don't need, you can ignore these. Okay, on stage, ignore all of this. Even the classes can be ignored, but I'm just checking it in case you run into some issues. Just ignore the git part, just ignore this error that comes for the class files. You just need to just add stage all of the classes here and just do an initial commit. So this commit will commit into your local machine. Okay, so my commit and push will push to my remote repository. I've already configured my remote repository, so the commit is done. So what happens is like object reference is not done. So what it says is like I haven't configured my commit yet. So I wanted to show you that. That's the reason I wanted to go ahead and do that. Let me go to the repository. See, there's no repository added. So what you need to do, okay, so let's ignore it for now. Let's do a reset. Let's delete all of the git here. Let me do it afresh. So the better approach is to create a git repo in GitHub first, because the reason why it's not able to upload is because I'm not having a repo there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is like I'm just going to create a simple repository which is like, so you are learning on what is the issues you will face if you are creating a repository. The commit to the local repository happened, but the public repo wasn't published. So what I'm doing is like creating a public repo first, follow the hierarchy. So I'm going to create a public repo called inventory management system, or IMS. Okay, IMS, inventory management system. My spellings have gone bad. Okay, just a public repo. I'm not going to do it. Just add a git ignore, no license. Okay, I don't need this. Everybody can make use of my project. That's it. So I created a readme, IMS inventory management system. So now I have a repo. Okay, so now what you can do is like you need to fork it, or you can clone it. Okay, so you can clone this repo from my GitExtensions. Go to GitExtensions, clone repository, go to a destination. Okay, so this is going to be the folder. Okay, clone. IMS already exists, so what we'll do, we'll just add a repo here. So this repository has added. So what happens is like it wasn't able to map to this IMS location. Okay, so what I'll do is like I'll copy the IMS, all of the functionality from here. I'll paste it here. Okay, so now if you go to the staging part, you will see 74 files. Ignore the git ignore. Go to this part. Stage it. Initial commit and push. Now your remote is configured. Let's see if it goes well. Or is it going to throw up an error? Yeah, now it's asking for authentication. Okay. I put my password wrong. One second, I'm going to stop the recording for some time. So let me continue. Boom, it should go in. I had my caps lock on. Okay. Now our code is pushed into the remote repo. Okay. If you can go here, refresh. All of the code should be here. Cool, isn't it? Now all of you guys can access my Git repo and make use of all the functionality. Okay. Cool then. Thanks guys. Just leave comments if my way of teaching was nice. I'm just planning to introduce more to-do projects for free, like just basic stuff for now. I don't want to dwell into other things which are already available via various courses. I see some of these repos or these projects are not having enough audio or explanations given with respect to debugging or SQL creation or Git uploading or functionality achieved using debugging. Okay, so thanks for your time. Have a good day. Enjoy. Let me know in comments if you found it useful, and any doubts you can comment me as well. Thank you, and always do not forget to subscribe to my channel and also try to like my videos as well. Thank you. Signing off, Ashwin Shakti. Thank you.